Hey, what is up, all you lonely watchers out there? Last year, I made a video about Cyborg Y that immediately got filled with insightful comments, including this one, which towards the end, mentions the fact that it's weird Android Yamada's name was localized to Cyborg Y in English, despite Android and Cyborg being entirely different terms. And looking back at Yokai Watch 3's English release, this seems to have been a decently prevalent debate throughout the fandom. While localization is somewhat necessary for Yokai Watch considering the target demographic, it can be a very contentious subject. Not only do some call it cultural erasure or whitewashing, but a lot of the name changes they do make can be confusing or just plain stupid. That's why today, I'd like to look at some examples of localized names I personally dislike or are contentious throughout the fandom, as well as throwing in my 2 cents for possible new names when applicable. Starting with the subject of the intro, Cyborg Y. This localization all comes down to one question. What really is the difference between a cyborg and an android? For the purposes of this video, I'll be using the Google definitions for these words, which were pulled from the Oxford Dictionary. By this metric, a cyborg is defined as a fictional or hypothetical person whose physical abilities are extended beyond normal human limitations by mechanical elements built into the body. Basically, a human with technological enhancements. In contrast, an android is a robot with a human appearance. To an extent, I feel like Cyborg Y fits both these definitions. Obviously, he's a robot who takes a human form, but he's also a real human underneath all that metal. The final episode of Cyborg Y's anime segment shows all the other kyborgs being turned back into humans, so it's reasonable to assume Cyborg Y could theoretically turn back as well. This could be interpreted as him being a human enhanced with a robotic body, although enhanced is a bit of a strong word. It's a fun semantic question that's up to interpretation and doesn't have a definitive answer. I prefer to call him Cyborg, but I have no quarrels with those who prefer Android. In Yokai Watch 3, a lot of the new American yokai ended up being mere pop culture references. Sure, there's some good yokai designs with clever names like Rocky Bad Boya and the Ghoul Father, but on the other side of the coin you have Terminyanator. This is stupid on so many levels. Firstly, why is his name structured like this? His Japanese name is Nyamineta, which would definitely sound clunky in English, but Terminyanator? Why add the extra syllable to make sure Nyan is in the name when we already have cat yokai who break this rule like Master Nyata? His name would have sounded so much better as Terminator. The only reason I can think of for why they wouldn't want to use this name is because maybe it's too close to Terminator already? Which, yeah, okay, fair if that's the case. But I'd even question the existence of this yokai in the first place. Because not only did we already get a yokai referencing the Terminator, but he's also a cat yokai, Robanyan. Robanyan was such a good parody, even using the Terminator's famous catchphrase, "I'll be back." Terminyanator, on the other hand, is way more on the nose in every aspect outside of this, as he says "meow be back" instead, which sounds so incredibly forced. I hate everything this yokai stands for and he should be wiped from the game entirely. Hashtag justice for Robanyan. Sorry about that. Something about that yokai just works every last one of my nerves. Anyway, let's move on to some shadow side localizations, such as Gusto in Yokai Watch 4. The origin of this name isn't very clear. I've heard people argue it's supposed to be in reference to a joke in Forever Friends where he relieves himself, but this is a massive stretch in my opinion. Others say it's because Gusto was actually a wind attribute yokai, which makes more sense, but it's still not terribly unique to him. The fandom's most common sentiment is that his name isn't very fitting and they should have just kept it as Nekomata, since he's practically a classic yokai. The only problem I have with this argument is consistency. Pretty much all classic yokai up to this point got their names localized when brought to the West, despite the fact they're supposed to be more literal interpretations of Japanese myths in comparison to their Yokai Watch 1 counterparts. Jorogumo became Arachnia, Ogama became Total Dude, Kappa became... we'll get to you later, bud. Either way, we still have some exceptions like Kirin. Gusto is never officially labeled as a classic yokai, and his two companions Kappa and Zashiki Warashi haven't gotten localized names. So it's hard to say on what precedent these localizations would be based on. Another big localized name from the Shadowside era everyone loves to dunk on is Tate, Nate's son in the future. On one hand, I get why they did this. In Japanese, the Adams family boys all have names starting with K: Keizo, Keita, and Keisuke. In English, Nate's grandfather's name was changed to Nathaniel, which is basically a different version of Nate's name already. When Keisuke was ready to get his localized name, there wasn't another form of Nathan for the writers to use, so they picked Tate, which would at least rhyme with Nate's name. It's for this reason that I don't take issue with Tate's name for attempting to adhere to the naming convention, but rather Nathaniel's name for creating it. I mean, you could have just done all N names like Nolan, Nicholas, Norman, anything but two names that are kinda the same but also different. Even then, this rule doesn't apply to Nate's father. In Japanese, he was only ever referred to as Keito no Chichi, or Keita's father. But in English, he was given the first name Aaron, throwing off this connection entirely. It just feels like the localization team created a very sloppy fix every time they ran into a problem with the naming convention they created. And it would have been better to simply not have a naming convention at all. Moving on to Yokai Watch 2, I think Toiletta is a very interesting case. Toiletta's Japanese name is Hanako-san, which was taken from the Japanese urban legend of a young girl's spirit who haunts schoolhouses, typically the third stall of the third floor women's restroom. Though her exact origin, appearance, and method of summoning can vary, she's one of the most famous urban legends to come out of Japan. I feel like for this reason, it wouldn't be unreasonable to keep her name as Hanako due to her cultural status. I've seen some say that her name should be changed to some sort of reference to Bloody Mary, but I personally feel like this would be very disrespectful, and honestly a little confusing, since the two figures do share some similarities, but are largely completely different. Though at the very least, that would have sounded more pleasing than Toiletta. That name just makes her sound so goofy and unserious, not meshing with her design at all. It also makes her name blend in more with the other female yokai, as it seems to have been a common trend in localization to just give a female yokai the name of a noun with an A tacked on the end. Blizzaria, Smogmella, Drizelda, Arachnia, etc. I feel like the name Hanako would have worked great as a confirmation for those in the know, as well as serving as a spark of curiosity for those who aren't. On the other side of the spectrum, we have Verygoodsir, a yokai frequently set up as a more competent opponent to Whisper and his butler duties. His design is a very fun mix of ghost and butler, which I can really appreciate, despite how much he's hated by those on Team Whisper. His English name is just a combination of the words of Verygoodsir, which can either be taken as something a butler would say, or words he would use to describe himself, reflecting his perfectionist nature or view on his own attitude. His Japanese name is simply Sebastian, a stereotypical butler name in Japan, popularized by a butler character of the same name in the anime, Heidi, Girl of the Alps. While Verygoodsir isn't a terrible name, I think it would be hilarious if his localized name was also just a name we associate with butlers. While Jeeves would technically be the English equivalent to Sebastian, popularized by the PG Wodehouse character Reginald Jeeves, the first two butlers I personally think of are Alfred Pennyworth from the Batman series and Bertram Winkle from the Disney Channel show Jessie. And I think either of those would be fantastic choices. Although personally, I'm more so leaning towards Bertram. And last but not least, one of the main reasons I wanted to even make this video in the first place. As part of the wave of classic yokai introduced in Yokai Watch 2 mentioned earlier, of course they had to make a new version of Kappa. I mean, Kappa is one of the most famous yokai in the world. There's no way they could leave him out. Yokai Watch 1 had its own version of Kappa, that being Wall Kappa. Unlike your typical Kappa, Wall Kappa likes to walk around on land, as well as enjoying food like pizza over cucumbers. This shouldn't be a problem though, as this new version of Kappa can just keep his Japanese name due to his notoriety, and who am I kidding? They didn't do this with Toiletta, and as the flagship classic yokai, you know they weren't gonna do it here. So what did they call him? Faux Kappa. You know, faux, the word meaning not genuine, fake, or false. Yeah, okay. Let's add that to the name of the Kappa yokai whose entire purpose for existence is to be the most accurate representation of Kappas in the entire franchise. That makes sense. This is the most baffling localization decision I've ever seen. Because not only is the name bad, it means the exact opposite of its Japanese counterpart, failing at both purposes of localization. And it's not like they're afraid to keep Japanese names for classic yokai because, yet again, Kirin exists. So why on earth could they not do that for the one yokai practically everyone on the planet with the slightest bit of cultural literacy is familiar with? It's so infuriating. But those are just my thoughts. I'm sure there are plenty of other localized names that anger all of you out there. And if y'all comment enough examples, maybe we can even revisit this subject in a part 2. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye, my lonely watchers.